I'm too sensitive.
Coming to you from Rochester, Minnesota,
I let every word they say
our town.
Way too sensitive.
Welcome to Our Town, the show about Rochester. I'm Nicole from MPTA, and today we're continuing our Rochester City Council discussions with Ward 2 seat candidates. Each candidate will have the opportunity to share and respond to the questions during this time. And since we want to cover as much as we can during this time, I've asked that each candidate limit their answers to about 30 seconds to about a minute. We'll be talking with the Ward 2 candidates today, and Ward 2 covers the area of Southwest, including downtown, and parts of Central Northwest Rochester. We're joined today by candidates Mark Bransford and the current incumbent, Michael Wojcik. Welcome to Our Town.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, to start us off, I would like you to each introduce yourselves. And in that introduction, if you could just tell us a little bit about what are some of the key issues that you're hearing from your constituents out there? And we'll start with you, Mark.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Bransford, and I'm running for Rochester City Council Ward 2. Just a little bit of background on me. My wife and I moved to Rochester in 2001. We raised 4 children in this amazing town, and I feel as though I have the intelligence and common sense to lead Ward 2. I have a PhD in astrophysics, and as a scientist and engineer, I bring 30 years of experience to the City Council in crafting solutions to very complex problems. One of the biggest pillars that I'm running on is to make sure that we fill the gap in the housing that we have for working men and women. We've made it way too hard to build outside the city center, and in the city center, all we have is very high land prices and very high rents. 30,000 people a day commute into Rochester, which needs to change because we need those people to settle here. And there are conditions for building outside the city center that have been made so difficult that we now have this affordable housing gap. And I have a plan on my website to address that. And I hope you can go to markbransford.com and read all the details.
Thank you, Mark. Michael?
Thank you again for having us, Nicole. I know that when it comes to public broadcasting viewers, I'm speaking to some of the most well-informed folks out there. So largely I know that you know me from my work. I've done a lot of work in the community, really addressed a lot of long-standing issues. I'm still one of the youngest elected officials anywhere in the city of Rochester at any level of government, and I do bring that vibrancy and energy. More so than any one particular issue, my ability to be there and be responsive to the community and to give honest answers when that's sometimes unpopular. I believe that continues to be my strength, and now I have a lot of experience that I'm going to be able to offer to a relatively new council starting next year.
Thank you both. Since you brought it up, Mark, I'll jump right into housing, actually. I'm wondering if each of you can talk specifically about how you define the affordable housing needs in the city, and what do you think City Council can do directly to address those needs? We'll start with you, Michael.
Thanks for the question. I think that Rochester is not unlike a lot of communities that are struggling with affordable housing, and a lot of it has to do with just the incredible pent-up demand for housing that we have. We've created something like 7,000 total units in the last few years, and those that have been filled up, they remain at like 95% occupancy. So we have affordable housing issues from a lack of flat-out affordable housing, but just from a lack of housing overall. And we continue to try and figure out how to most cost-effectively build that. I'm a big believer in sustainable development. I know that geographically we're bigger than Minneapolis and St. Paul right now, and so building more infrastructure isn't going to make us more cost effective. What we've done a lot to do on the City Council is making sure that fees do not exceed the costs of providing services, and making sure that we have growth that goes out in the most cost effective areas to do it, and a heavy focus on infill. The Berkman project might not seem like affordable housing, but a substantial portion of the units there are actually a lot cheaper to live there than live in the adjoining neighborhood. And that's something people don't realize, that all housing helps to solve these issues at all levels.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, infill development has its place. We do need density downtown, but I'd like to point out that in Minneapolis, home ownership is now below 50%. We don't want to be Minneapolis. God bless them, but our housing right now downtown is very expensive, and it's a bit disingenuous to say that the Berkman is somehow affordable. A $1,200 a month for a flat without a yard or a garage, normalize it. The cost per square foot is insanely high. So that's just not a good example to use. What we need to do is actually reduce the permitting fees, the SAC and WAC fees, the sewer and water fees, to allow for development outside the city center to provide a product that people want and need. When you make building housing so expensive that we don't build, you raise property taxes. This notion of infrastructure sprawl is a false narrative. New construction does pay its way, and the long-term economic benefits of having people buy these houses, settle here, get jobs, and put their money into the economy far outweighs any upfront cost.
You both. Of course, housing is just one of many issues that are sort of swirling in this new pandemic environment. So, and this is a really, this next question is super general, but cities are sort of at the front and center of navigating this pandemic. And what ways would you work to ensure the continued safety and recovery of our city and its citizens, and particularly since Ward 2 covers parts of downtown as well, and that recovery question is a big one. Since you're currently on the council, Michael, you can also share your commitments around this if reelected. We'll start with you, Mark.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask Michael. Yeah, we need to make sure that we mask and that we enforce the masking. The scientific evidence, the interpretation of the scientific evidence, it's sort of a pet peeve of mine to say the data shows. Really, data doesn't tell you anything. It's the interpretation of the data that matters. Right now, it's clear that masking does help and distancing helps. And we just have to be really careful about making sure that the mask mandate sticks and that people follow it and that restaurants and stores follow it. And there's not a whole lot left we can do. People at some level own their own behavior, and we're only as strong as our weakest link. And obviously we can't arrest people or do things like that, but we need to lead by example. And so the leaders in the community have to mask and keep their distance. And we have to be careful about how many people, for public transportation, for example, we can't cram people into buses, and we have to make sure that city-owned transportation follows those rules very carefully as well. Among many other things, it's hard to put everything in 30 seconds.
Of course. Appreciate your efforts. Michael, please.
I do think it's important that leaders have to lead even when it's unpopular. Everyone gets the masking ordinance now, but when it actually came time to put this in place, I'm the only person running for this seat that had the courage to stand up and say, yes, we are going to do this. I was a leader in that regard. And there's going to be other challenges ahead, because there are some times that we're going to have to do some unpopular things. And that means we need to trust folks like public health and our medical professionals in the community to make these good decisions. We have a lot of opportunities coming up because we are going to get past COVID-19. There are a lot of places that I would not want to be. Rochester is a pretty good place because we know we're going to get past this, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities that present themselves. So it's important that we don't bury our head in the sand and forget that there are things that we can be doing now to strengthen our position in the future. Certainly investing in better, smarter transit, livable densities, live workplaces, the kind of places that can spread out people and do work, and adjust some of the existing infrastructure that we have downtown to be more pandemic friendly. These are all opportunities that are in front of us, and having a capable council that's willing to move quickly on these issues is one of the best things we can do for the community.
I know there's been a little bit of a reticence in this current environment to spend money and to budget in a way that is effective. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, before the break here, what your key priorities around spending city money are and what they would be, and how you would work to ensure that the council is a responsible and transparent fiscal manager of the city's resources. We'll start with you, Mark.
Yeah, I've read the budget and it's pretty opaque. It's a very difficult document to read. So one of the things that I'd like to do with respect to the budget is make it easier to digest and understand. I would actually like to see more money simply right now, just tighten our belt to make sure that we're putting money into infrastructure, making sure our police force and fire department are well funded. In the social justice movement, we need to increase the number of social workers that we have in the police force to respond to certain kinds of incidents. And so I'd actually like to see a little bit more money spent in helping the police get to that goal. Other than that, I think we have to look at it one by one and be very careful not to overdo it with capital spending. I know the transit system and the transit plan is a very popular thing, and the plans going forward, look great, I guess. But I think we need to step back and make sure that it's going to be something that a fair number of people will use. With the pandemic in particular, we have people working outside of downtown. We have real numbers from Mayo Clinic. It's, I think, around 1,500, which is a substantial number of people. We have 30,000 people commuting a day and a lot of parking downtown. So I think we really need to step back and look at how much we want to spend on the new rapid transit system, because I think that's where a lot of the money would be going if we just go full bore.
Thank you. Michael?
There's a lot to unpack there, but we've cut the budget top to bottom about 17% next year, which is fairly substantial. And I think it's critically important, these long run programs that we're a part of, to keep them moving. That's why I'm so adamant about continuing to invest in transit. We think that this is a long run cost savings to the entire community, having a good transit system. We need to be opportunistic when opportunities present themselves. Certainly what's going on with the potential library on the Post Bulletin site. It's the ability to perhaps create a library when we otherwise would not have the resources to do so. And then there's going to be a lot of opportunities that come up in recovery. After the last financial crisis, we didn't do a great job of tracking those federal dollars into Rochester to help with the recovery. And we need to be smart and be ready on some of these projects so we can seize these opportunities for recovery dollars to help keep the jobs in the construction industry going strong as well. There's a lot of other things that have to be done with COVID-19, but other levels of government tend to be the ones that can print money and deal with these, and we need to rely on them for what their role is as well.
Thank you both for your responses, and we will be right back to hear more from the Ward 2 candidates, so stay tuned.
Our Town is brought to you in part by the following amazing people and organizations:
the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota,
and the members of KSMQ Public Television. Thank you. For more information about this story and other Our Town features, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter at KSMQ #OurTown, or ksmq.org/OurTown.
About a million ways you could break my heart. Don't tell me I'm right when I'm not.
Welcome back. Over the next few weeks, we've been speaking to candidates for Rochester City Council ahead of the November election. And today, we're joined by Ward 2 candidates for City Council, Michael Wojcik and Mark Bransford. And we're going to be kicking off the second half of the candidate conversation by talking a little bit about social justice and public safety, law enforcement. Of course, the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis has renewed the struggle for Black lives, and there are a number of issues at play. My question first, I guess it's a first two-part question. The first one is, what do the words Black Lives Matter mean to you? And what would be your commitments, the second part of the question, around representing historically underrepresented communities of color in our city? And I'll start with you, Michael.
Thanks for the question. This is something that's important to me. When some of these protests are going on over the murder of George Floyd, I've been there to listen to folks. I'm proud to have been endorsed by both Rochester for Justice and the Sierra Club because of my commitment to racial justice. I think that we need more than platitudes and more than just creating another committee. There are real things that we can do to improve the representation of underrepresented peoples. There are things like ranked choice voting. creating the diversity and inclusion office that we're doing in the city of Rochester. These are real meaningful steps that we can do. And when it comes time to actual meaningful actions and not creating another committee, I'll be there for underrepresented peoples because I do believe their lives matter.
Thank you, Michael. Mark?
Yeah, well, it means to me that we have a group of people who have historically been underrepresented and discriminated against, and that needs to stop. And so it's very important that we do something about it and not talk about it. The Office of Diversity in the city is a great first step. One of the things that I'd like to see are the metrics for success. What does success mean in that space? And one of the things that I have done is actually went out and spoke with people in the social justice movement here to find out what they actually want and need. It's okay to create a committee, but if you don't know what solutions and what means success, then that's a problem. And in speaking with these two individuals, Jackie Booth and Crystal Smith, they said, and I asked them, when I'm on the city council, what's the most important thing that I can do for you? And the first thing out of their mouth was housing. Housing is number one. They struggle for housing. And so one of the things that I'd like to see as a metric for success in the diversity office is that we get serious about giving them, fixing up the hovels that we have in the southeast side of town, giving them a proper place to live, giving them opportunities for education and getting trade. Community education is going to be really important to make sure that they have the education and trades that they can have to apply a trade and make a livable wage. This is so important. It really is. And if they have those means, and not only that, I would like to see housing for them where they have ownership options. Ownership is one of the biggest sources of equity that any of us have. And if all they have available to them is expensive rental units downtown, that's not sufficient. They need to be able to have ownership. And when you have ownership, you have belonging. And when you have belonging, you have civic engagement.
Thank you,
That's
Mark.
really what we need.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. It's, the social justice and the racial justice movement, as you both touched on, there's a lot of issues at play, socioeconomic issues for sure, are at front and center of that, as well as public safety and law enforcement. And so my next question is how both of you can think about improving public safety while also promoting stronger ties between all members of our community and law enforcement, and the role that you see City Council playing in facilitating this. And we'll start with you, Mark.
Yeah, that's a great point. And really, it's just a collaboration between the City Council and the Rochester Police Force. I've gotten to know Chief Franklin quite well. And the question of equity and public safety has come up a number of times, and I was very curious about what he's doing. And one of the things that he's done is adopted the Barack Obama plan for policing in the 21st century, which is a great plan because it emphasizes hiring practices for compassion and honesty and integrity. And one of the things that he said is, I can take the person who finished last in the police force and train them up, but I can't train a person to have compassion and integrity and honesty and a willingness to serve all people. And that has become a part of our hiring practices, and they've moved that diversity needle up about 5%, and it's still way too low. But ultimately, the way we're going to overcome these differences is to have a police force that's representative of all peoples and compassionate people. And then we'll have people who protect and serve truly with the best interests of the community in mind.
Thank you, Michael.
I do believe that there is no substitute for having a workforce that actually represents the community. And I think we need to create more options for those who don't have the privilege of being able to go to school for 2 or 4 years to transition into meaningful roles in the community. I also think it's important to realize that we are an incredibly safe community here in Rochester. And one of my biggest fears too is that we can underfund some of the areas that help create a sense of opportunity and unity in the community at the expense of putting more and more into law enforcement. And I think that's why it's so important that we continue to be building great places, whether it be parks or schools or libraries, so that people have access to opportunity, because that's something that there is no replacement for local government's ability to truly create pillars of equity for people.
Thank you both. How do you think the City Council can work to improve transparency and communication with the community? And what would you specifically recommend? We'll start with you, Michael.
Well, as the author and initiator of the Transparency Act of 2019, I absolutely love this. We used to have a mayor who wanted to have his private dinner meetings where there were no recordings and sometimes no media and not accessible to the public. And we threw out that practice and a whole bunch of other things with the Transparency Act. Now, every single public meeting has a usable recording of it. It has minutes, it has an agenda, and those days have certainly passed. I'm also committed to, after every meeting, you can find my recap of what happened at that meeting. So there is no substitute for just standing up to some of the people in the past, our former mayor being one of them, who didn't think that the public had the right to see what was going on. And I have to tell you, for issue after issue, just the fact that everything is out in the public, it's made a world of change in terms of getting things done and having people make appropriate decisions on the council.
Thank you, Michael. Mark?
Yeah, and speaking with people in the ward, one of the most commonly heard, one of the things I've most commonly heard is a sense of disenfranchisement with the city, that the city is very city focused and not community focused. And in particular in the housing, they feel like because there's such a microscopic focus on downtown, that somehow downtown isn't for them. I'm not saying that's correct, but that is what people feel. And so you have to ask yourself, how come? And we've heard that there's this great community outreach to explain the future plans that are going on in Rochester. But really, when it boils right down to it, not that many people can make them. People work, people lack the means for transportation to get there. And I think we need to figure out a way, the Zoom world is great. I think that now we have the means and the experience to have these community forums actually online. You can see the Rochester City Council meetings online. You can see a lot of board meetings online. That's a really great thing. But when it comes to how we're building the city and the decisions made, we need more than just a handful of people with the means to actually get to these meetings and have a voice. Everybody needs to have a voice. And right now, I don't think that many people feel like that they do. And one way of doing that is what we're doing right here, reaching people, a lot of people, and having time to have a dialogue with as many people in this community as we can have.
Thank you both. We are up to our last question right now as we wrap up this half hour. And to wrap us up, I'd like to ask you to share why you think that you would be best suited for the position of representing Ward 2 on the City Council. We'll start with you, Mark.
Well, I believe that I bring a lot of experience, 30 years of experience of solving very complex problems. You won't find me advocating for pet projects and things that I think are important. I have a website that has a lot of details on fixing the housing gap that we have. And that really is the number one issue in my mind that I can bring to the table, is to make sure that we're more like Des Moines, where their median cost of a house is $150,000, and here it's $250,000. If you read their comprehensive plan, they do a lot of really good things that we could adopt here. And we also need to stop this notion that building outside the city center and that is somehow increasing the cost to do that is somehow a good idea. Infill development is really expensive, and land prices downtown are really expensive. And the cost of not allowing the building of lower density and single family homes outside the city center is one of the reasons why we have such a big issue. And we really need to add more housing to the mix so that we can get people to settle here, stay here, become civically involved. And the other thing is I'm really want to focus on community education for the people that are underrepresented and really need skills, and to find a way in our budgets to make sure that we can help those individuals get that education that they need and get the skills that they need.
Thank you, Mark. Michael?
One of the things I'm proudest of in my time in office is that I've always been there for the little guy. I've never been the kind of person who relies on special interests supporting me. I'm available. Anyone needs to reach out to me, they're able to reach out to me and they get honest answers. I'm not in the business of trying to make everyone happy, but I've delivered tremendous results for the community. And it's easy to look past the incredible things that we have going on here in Rochester. Things are changing. Life is going to be hard. COVID is not helping that at all, but we have tremendous opportunity here. We are excited that all across the city, we're growing at a rapid rate. People are investing in Rochester. We're creating new jobs in the downtown with places like Discovery Square, high-paying jobs. We're building all kinds of housing and filling it up, and we have some of the best parks and trails anywhere. I wouldn't trade my life here in Rochester for any other place. And I think it's important to realize just how good we have it here and how much more we can do to try and extend that to people who traditionally not shared in that benefit.
Thank you both so much for joining us, for your service already in campaigning and being part of the council, Councilmember Wojcik. We are going to be continuing our conversations with candidates for the next couple of weeks. And we just want to thank you today for joining us. And just a friendly reminder that polls are open for early voting as well as mail-in voting. And of course, polls will be open on Election Day on November 3rd. That's all for now. Be well and stay safe. And we will see you next time on Our Town, the show about Rochester.
There's a million ways you can break my heart. Try it. I'm too sensitive. I let